please take the attendance? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Chair Supple,
I'm here.
Commissioner Vries-Daniels,
Here.
Commissioner Reagan-Gonzalez,
Here.
Commissioner Elliott, not present. Commissioner Sandel,
She was here, and I believe she's having technical difficulties.
okay. We have 4 members present.
Thank you. Next is the open forum. So it's the opportunity to address the HRA on items not on the agenda. You can dial the phone number 612-861-0651. And as you call in, a moderator will assist you. So do we have anyone who's called in at this point?
We have no callers at this time, Chair Supple.
Okay, we can wait a moment and see if anyone else calls in. Oh.
Yep. Chair Supple, so this is Executive Director Stark. I believe we may not be broadcasting live tonight. I'm not sure. I believe that's what I heard from our IT folks. Jane might be on the call. If that's the case, this will be rebroadcast certainly, but it may that may hinder our ability to take open forum calls.
Hi, this is Jane Scove from IT. We are live on YouTube and we are live on the website.
Oh, good.
And we should be able to take calls. It's just not channel 16 that's not available tonight.
Got it.
All right, thank you. Has anyone called in?
We have not received any calls, Chair Supple.
Okay, so at this point, if someone does call, we'll pause, but let's go ahead with a couple of the housekeeping issues here. So next on the agenda, is approval of the concurrent Housing and Redevelopment Authority and City Council work session of September 21st, 2020, and the regular HRA meeting of September 21st, 2020, and the special Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting of September 29th, 2020.
So moved, Commissioner Reagan-Gonzalez.
Second, Commissioner Vries-Daniels.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Reagan-Gonzalez and seconded by Commissioner Vries-Daniels. Does anyone have any comments or questions about the minutes? All right, Commissioner Sandel, we can hear you. Sounds like you can't hear us yet, but at this point, I'm going to ask Administrative Assistant Dubois to take the roll on the minutes.
Yes, thank you, Chair Supple. Chair Supple,
Aye.
Commissioner Vries-Daniels,
Aye.
Commissioner Reagan-Gonzalez,
Aye.
and Commissioner Sandel, are you able to hear us? Okay, we have 3 ayes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have approval of the agenda, and thank you for writing us about it this time. So is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved, Commissioner Vries-Daniels.
Second, Commissioner Reagan-Gonzalez.
So it's been moved by Commissioner Vries-Daniels and seconded by Commissioner Reagan-Gonzalez to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? All right, then Administrative Assistant Dubois, would you go ahead and take the roll?
I just unmuted it.
Yes, thank you. Chair Supple,
Aye.
Commissioner Vries-Daniels,
I'll go back in the other room.
Aye.
What else to do?
Aye.
I don't do either. I don't.
Commissioner Reagan-Gonzalez.
Aye.
Okay, and Commissioner Sandel, are you able to hear us? Okay, we have 3 ayes. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We do not have a consent agenda this evening. So we're going to move to consideration of the acceptance of the Richfield Housing and Redevelopment Authority Tax Increment Financing District Status Update. Executive Director Stark.
Thank you, Chair Supple. I'm actually going to pass this along to Community Development Accountant Mert Link to introduce the topic. Thank you.
Chair Supple and Commissioners, the Tax Increment Financing District Status Update is presented to the Richfield Housing and Redevelopment Authority annually for review. There are currently 11 active TIF districts. This year, the TIF status update shows that the HRA is able to meet all of its pay-as-you-go note and general tax obligation bond obligations. At this point, I'm going to turn things over to Rebecca Kurtz from Ellers, who will do a presentation on all of the TIF districts. And at the end, Rebecca, John, and I will be happy to answer any of your questions. Rebecca?
Thank you. Again, Rebecca Kurtz with Ellers. And Mert gave really the summary and the number one message for this evening. You do have 11 active TIF districts, and we are anticipating that the HRA will be able to meet all of its obligations related to those TIF districts. Just a couple things related to the obligations. Again, many of you have heard me say this before, but for those of you who have not, there are three types of obligations that are related to your TIF districts. The first one and most common one that the city, not only the city and HRA in Richfield, but really communities across Minnesota use, is a pay-as-you-go TIF note. And in that situation, the developer is responsible for paying all of the expenses for completing the project. And after the time that the project is completed and documentation of the expenses is provided to the HRA, a note is issued, and then the TIF is used to pay off that note. The benefit of that is that the risk of the obligation is really directed to the developer or the note holder. So to the extent that increment is not sufficient to make all of the anticipated payments, and that could be because the market value isn't as high as expected, taxes weren't paid in full, the legislature changed the TIF laws, the risk of that note being paid in full is assumed by the developer, and there is no risk to the city, again, or the HRA. So again, the reason why we tend to, in many cases, look at pay-as-you-go obligation. The HRA does have two general obligation tax increment bonds that were issued by the city, where the city and the HRA assume the responsibility paid cap front for those projects, and then the TIF is being used to make those debt service payments on the general obligation bond. I will talk specifically on the two projects that have bonds associated with it. The third type of obligation is an interfund loan, and this is a loan that the HRA establishes typically at the time that you start working on a new TIF district. And it is a loan that's used to pay some of those upfront costs in many situations, and then the TIF reimburses that over time. Many times it is tied to administration or some of those upfront expenses. With that, we typically see an interfund loan with any new TIF district. It is in the life cycle of TIF a newer requirement. And so there are a couple of the older districts that don't have those interfund loans in place, but it is something that moving forward, we always ask the HRA to consider when a new district is established. And it is something that we are now seeing the Office of the State Auditor look for and require if you do want to use any tax increment to reimburse yourself for funds that have been expended. So those are the three types of obligations that we'll be addressing as we go through the report this evening. A couple other general things I want to remind you of that apply to all of the districts are that the HRA may retain up to 10% of the tax increment revenue for administration expenses. While there are a couple districts that are receiving a large amount of TIF and we have not retained the full 10%, the HRA is working to maximize that to the extent that it can be justified and can be captured. In addition, there are some redevelopment districts where the HRA is retaining 25% for pooling. And that 25% number includes the amount retained for TIF. So in the case where you may not retain a full 10% for administration, that is giving you the opportunity to retain more than 15% through pooling. So again, 25% for pooling. When I mention pooling, that means those funds, they ultimately are redevelopment tax increment funds. So they must be spent on qualified expenses as related to a redevelopment tax increment district. However, those funds can be spent outside the boundaries of the specific TIF district where they are collected. They are required to be spent within the project area. However, your project area is coterminous with your city limits, so that gives you the maximum flexibility on where those funds can be spent. With that, and again, I'm happy to answer questions. I know that you did receive the report in advance, so I'm not going to go through every detail of it, but I do want to take some time and point out some highlights for some specific districts. So as we look at the Urban Village TIF district, I just want to point out that it will be decertified by 2025. And there are several districts that have that decertification date. You may recall that last year the HRA was able to decertify 2 TIF districts and saw a significant increase in the city's tax capacity. So while 2025 seems like it is a ways out, there are some districts that are older and we're going to start to see the benefit of that fully on the tax roll in the next 5 years or so here. Urban Village being one of those. The other one that is going to have likely a huge impact on the city's tax base when decertified in 2025 is the Interchange West and Lindale Gateway District. That is the district that has 2 components. One includes mostly the Best Buy corporate headquarters, and then the other one is the Richfield Senior Housing Project, or also maybe known as Twin City Christian Homes. Both of those projects do have pay-as-you-go notes that, again, payments are being made on them. We do not expect the pay-as-you-go notes to be paid in full. However, again, because of the nature of those, there's not a risk to the city or the HRA if they are not paid in full. The Best Buy project, or the Interchange West component, does have one of the general obligation TIF bonds outstanding with that. With that, I just want to call out specifically that we do anticipate that there will be no concerns in making those payments in full through the tax increment revenue. The Best Buy project does have a minimum assessment agreement in place for that specific purpose to make sure that there is increment that will be available to make those payments, and that minimum assessment agreement will be in place through the term of the outstanding general obligation bonds. So with that, again, ultimately, the HRA will be able to make all of the obligations associated with that district. I'm going to jump down to the Lindale Gateway West TIF district, or the district that includes the Kensington Park mixed-use redevelopment, so the condominiums, townhomes, along with the retail on Lindale Avenue. This is the other district that does have a general obligation TIF bond outstanding. For those of you who have been part of the HRA for a while, you know this is a district we have been watching, and in the last several years had some concerns with the ability to make the annual debt service payments, but we did recognize that ultimately the debt could be paid through tax increment. So with that, we've gotten to a point and values have again started to increase. So the HRA is able to make all of the general obligation bond payments through tax increment. The interfund loan that was put in place as a temporary hold during that period when there were shortfalls is going to be paid off in full. And we anticipate that by 2020, all of the obligations related to that GOTIF bond will be paid, so that we will just continue to use TIF at that point to make the balance of the debt service payments. The second part of this obligation is a $1,100,000 interfund loan. This was a combination of two interfund loans, one that was to be taken out at the time when the developer refinanced the project. As many of you may know, that did not happen, and the project went through some challenging times several years ago. We've been watching this loan, and for years we have been projecting that it was unlikely that it would be able to be paid in full. And with the way values are in the update today is that, again, the principal amount of the loan is $1.1 million. Based on current projections, we are anticipating that the principal can be paid in full. We still do not believe that there will be enough to pay all of the interest on this. However, again, for those of you that have heard me give an update for many years, you will know that this is quite a turnaround from where we were maybe 5-8 years ago. So we're anticipating that there will be, again, full principal for that and some interest on the note. Ultimately, those future values are going to will determine how much interest is paid, and the higher the values are, the more interest that we can get paid off on that. To the extent that values declined, we may not have as much, but we are in a significantly better position than where we were a few years ago on that. I also will note that with that, it was a project, and while I can't speak completely for the HRA at the time, but it was a project that was very important to the HRA and the community. And at the time, they were willing to take that risk. And while there were hopes that all of the obligations would be paid in full, there was always a question of whether or not that interfund loan would be able to be fully paid off.
So before you go on, can I paraphrase to make sure I'm understanding?
Absolutely.
So the only part of the three obligations that we maybe won't get to is some of the interest on the interfund loan. Is that correct?
Based on the projections where we are today, that is correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So then moving on to the next district, and I know that this will also have some future discussion later on this evening and likely into the future beyond, is the Cedar Corridor TIF district. This was a redevelopment district along the airport noise impact area. And currently we are looking at the proposal for the Cedar Point 2 apartment project. That is the only development at this point in time that is taking place in that district. There is a pending pay-as-you-go note. However, we are working on finalizing some renegotiation with this district. So while the obligations that are in place today include an interfund loan for administration, an interfund loan for some land acquisition, and then an estimated 3.96 million pay-as-you-go note that would be issued at the time the project is completed. those obligations are subject to change based on some decisions by the HRA and continued discussions with the developer. There also is an obligation for $780,000 that is listed. I do want to note that while it is tied to this district, it is anticipated that that might be paid with land sale proceeds. So at the time that the developer closes on the land, that obligation is likely to go away. But again, that also is part of the discussions that we are currently having with the developers. So more to come on that. Again, the important thing to note though is that with these obligations, we ultimately will need to have development take place to start repaying those interfund loans. And without that development, there will not be the revenue to make those payments. The 2010-1 housing TIF district is the Lindale Plaza or Woodlake Housing Apartment at the former Woodlake Plaza shopping center site in the city. I call this out only because this district legally must be decertified by 2039. The market values on this have gone much higher than what was projected. And so what that means is the obligations are getting paid off much quicker than what was projected when the district was established in 2002. We still have some time on this, but based on numbers today and values, we could see full payment of this district as early as in 2026. The next project that I am going to jump down to is the 2018-1 TIF district or RF64. Again, this is the housing district that is also associated with the Cedar Avenue project. And just want to note there that there has been a little change in the obligations, and that is to reflect that there will be 64 townhomes that are anticipated to be constructed versus the 80. My understanding is in large part that was because there was some challenges acquiring some of the parcels that would be needed in order for 80 townhomes to be constructed. I know those are under construction, and at the time that the developer has met the requirements for documentation for the 32 townhomes, and then also submitted documentation that the families that those townhomes are sold to meet the affordable income requirements per MHFA or Minnesota Housing Finance. That note will be issued, or the first note for that will be issued on that. And we would anticipate that increment will be generated, or first payment could be in 2022. The final district I'm going to call out is the Henley 2 or the 2020-1 TIF district. As you know, we look at numbers and typically do this report or update a little earlier in the fall, and a lot of times look at it from year-end numbers as of 2019, December 31st, 2019. We had some discussions on this, and because we are doing the report a little later, we did want to recognize that in September, the Henley 2 or 2020-1 TIF district is established. That is going to be another rental housing that included new housing and along with rehab of an existing rental unit or rental building. And so that is moving forward. Again, it will have the affordable requirements, and I would anticipate that in a year when I'm back in front of you again, we'll have an update as far as having more construction completed and maybe even having the note issued for that. As you may know, there are a couple other districts that are anticipated, and we will be further discussing those in November with public hearings for your consideration, or public hearings at the council level, but updates to the HRA and further discussions on 2 additional redevelopment districts and housing projects. And then we wrapped up again, recognizing the districts that the city has been able to complete and decertify, which, you know, as that list grows, really shows the work that has been done not only by the current HRA and council, but by people in your position in the past. And I think is really a testament to the work that has been done over time to get the community to where you are today, and being extremely busy, I would say, with new development and projects. It's an exciting time to see what's happening in Richfield and be part of it. With that, I am happy to, I will, 2 other items I'll note. There is a map that does highlight where each of the TIF districts are in the community. And then there is a high level overview of just a reminder of what tax increment financing is and how it works, as a resource that you could refer back to. But with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, and thank you for that very thorough report. As I was preparing for the meeting, I was really happy to see that you had the maps and you had explained which districts, where they were by landmarks, because sometimes it's confusing if you put it by years. It also helped to have all the definitions, like of pay as you go and all of that background information. So if anybody is listening to the broadcast, I would need to look at those agenda items, because it does clear explanations, in my opinion, of how TIF works and all of the different types of TIF and that kind of thing. So are there questions that commissioners have? Commissioner Breeze-Daniels?
Yes, thank you. I want to just chime in and say your report is always very thorough and helpful for me to reference back to, so thank you. I do have a question on page 3, and it's really just for my own knowledge, I guess, is on the pooling question. So the 3 Cedar, Lindale, and the 2014-1 don't have any balances. Is that because we've spent them already?
No, that is because they are newer districts that haven't gotten to the point. So we wanted to recognize that as those start to generate more increment and additional revenue, they will be contributing to the pooling funds, and those funds will be available. But because, again, Cedar Corridor is under development, there were some delays with the 2014 TIF district, and then Lindale Gardens is just really starting to get to its full generation or TIF generation. We will be seeing numbers coming in future years there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Executive Director Stark?
And I would just add on the topic of pooling, we asked Ellers to help us do a little bit deeper dive into our pooling, what kind of pooling resources we have that can and should be spent. And we are planning to come back to you next month with a memo that gives you more detail on the available pooled TIF funds.
Relating to that topic, on the, I believe it was the Interchange West Lindale Gateway, it said you were going to be monitoring the pooling expenses. What exactly do you monitor? I could think of about 3 different things you might be monitoring. How could you explain that to us?
Absolutely. And that's a little foreshadowing for the information that'll be presented in November. But with this, it's a large district generating a large amount of tax increment, and there again were lots of parts with the Best Buy project and the Richfield Senior Housing that currently have notes. There was a 3rd note that was issued and quickly paid off for the townhome portion in the Lindale Gateway component. And so we worked with staff and looked at where the district has been, looked at the amount to verify what could legally be pooled, and really to just verify the finances and make sure they were in line, and that we were in compliance with not only administration, that we were not over the 10%, and that we were within the limits of that 25% for pooling, because we're aware that we knew where we were at with specific projects, but we wanted to make sure we were in line with the entire district. I will say, with that analysis, as John mentioned, we will be bringing some additional information forward in November. But what we did find is that district has been very well managed by the HRA and staff, and you are well within the requirements that are outlined in Minnesota statute and in compliance with the standards set by the state auditors. So we do not have concerns with that, but we are looking at some opportunities on what could be done with some of those funds.
Commissioner Regan Gonzalez.
I have a question that's about kind of state level policy around TIF. I know we've talked about advocating for more flexible use of TIF. What does that picture look like? Like, is that something that would be possible and likely to successfully advocate for? Are other cities, or I guess HRAs, doing this? What does that picture look like of actually making that happen and possible?
That is a great question. I will say, from generally with just the legislature making some changes that would make TIF a more flexible tool, while we are every year having discussions and seeing some, I would argue, minor changes that maybe are more cleaning up to help with making clarifications, I do not anticipate that, at least in the near future, we will see the legislature make a dramatic change to TIF that would make it across the board, give communities more flexibility on how those funds are being spent. With that being said, there are opportunities if there are special projects or concerns that, and you guys have done this with pursuing some special legislation. It's always an option. We all know that can be challenging. You don't know, it's likely going to fall into the tax bill ultimately. And with at least the current situation, it's sometimes a challenge to get a tax bill passed. So that's maybe not great news, but that's kind of where we're at with the flexibility. We do think there is some opportunity under the current guidelines that are out there to provide some options for maybe a little more opportunity to use TIF with affordable housing projects. Again, it's still going to have, a list of rules that go with it on the specific type of project, but we are looking at some things that ways we could maybe bring some ideas to the council and the HRA for that discussion.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? I had one about the map. There may be some others on that question. I was looking at the map you provided of where the districts were, and I noticed what originally had been like that theater corridor, just at where the chief facility is now, and the NHA have been pulled. When the apartments and some of that goes forward, is that going to be split off as well, or is it just going to be remaining one district south of 60?
At this point, there are no plans that it would be split off. It was an intentional decision by the developer and then the HRA to keep that in that Cedar Corridor district that, is quite large. And the reason for that is because that is a redevelopment district, as you guys know, established under special legislation. And so it has some flexibility that we would not have if a new TIF district were established for the apartment project. So at this point, I think it is intended to keep what is identified, I guess, on the map as TIF District 6 and 2 parts like that, at least for the development that's proposed at this time.
Executive Director Stark.
Yes, thank you. I would just add that we talked, I believe, at goal setting last year with both and the HRA about reevaluating the seat of district and maybe removing some of our in that district, as Ms. Kurtz said, dropping off. Catch back up. The reason this district was originally established was due to noise impacts associated with the north-south runway. While those noise impacts are real and did occur, I don't believe they occurred to the detrimental level that folks had been anticipating. And so, for example, the area, and I know it's hard to see on the map, but south of 69th Street, because that's so narrow, it makes it a challenge for development to occur there anyway. It's quite expensive to acquire single-family homes for redevelopment. And so we're just thinking some of these areas may be less and less feasible to redevelop. Some of the homeowners feel like that this being a redevelopment district puts them in a state of limbo. So again, we are going to continue to look at whether to take some of these parcels out. There doesn't seem to be a sense of urgency to do that. And our to-do list is quite long these days. So that's just one of those things we haven't quite gotten to.
Okay, thank you. And just one quick clarification that also has to do with the map while we're talking about the map. So the Lindale Plaza Housing District 2010-1, is that the one that is south of 64th Street, right along Lindale? Am I reading that correctly?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions from commissioners? Then I have actually another one, but I didn't want to keep asking if other people had them. I was hoping Executive Director Stark could refresh my memory, because I remember you stated in an earlier meeting that there were 2 big development projects going forward that did not require any TIF. Can you remind us what those 2 were?
Yes. One is under construction now. It's the Novo Apartments, which is behind the CVS at Penn and 66th. And the other is the apartments that are not yet under construction, but soon to be, in the Lunds parking lot.
Okay, so neither one of them had any TIF monies involved.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And then I also have, I guess I have a lot of questions here. One final question. When Ms. Kurtz was talking about the chart that had the districts that were coming off of, they were going to finish out, what's the word for it? They were finishing out they'd paid off their bonds and they were being phased out. Can you talk about like what the effects are on the tax base? I know we've talked about that we wouldn't have as much money for the Housing and Redevelopment Fund, but there also are probably pros and cons and good things. So as you decertify districts, I knew I'd remember that word. As you decertify districts, what are some of the effects of that, both positive and
I will be happy to comment. I was looking to see if John wanted to jump in or if you'd like me to. But so as you said, if you want to argue the negatives, it will impact some of the administration that the city is able to retain for reimbursing for staff time. and it will impact the Housing and Redevelopment Fund as those come off, especially if there are not new projects contributing to that fund coming on. But the impact of having those districts come off is that it's going to suddenly, the city will receive the benefit of the full value of that on your city tax rolls or in your city tax base. So, and I don't have the numbers handy and in front of me, but last year when the interchange and Gramercy projects came off, there was, I believe, I'm going to estimate low. It was over 300,000 in tax capacity that came back to the city's tax base that suddenly you can receive the benefit of. And what that means, and it ultimately depends on decisions by the council, but as you see the increase in tax capacity, if nothing else changed, you would have the ability to reduce the tax rate. Or looking at it another way, when you see that increase in tax capacity, it could be the way to do some additional capital projects without needing to dramatically raise the tax rate. So it, one can argue that it gives that benefit to allow the city to be more flexible with its budgeting, or maybe do some of those projects that are important to the community, but policymakers struggle because it is potentially going to have tax impacts that could be burdensome to some members.
I would just add that, you know, when a district is decertified, that tax capacity, as Ms. Kurtz mentioned, the city gets about a third of the additional tax capacity that comes back in. The county gets the bulk of it, but the Richfield Public Schools also gets a portion of that as well.
And just to clarify, the tax revenue, as John said, is going to be split by roughly a third, or allocated across the city, county, and school district. And that tax capacity is the one step before you get to the actual tax revenue. So while I said tax capacity coming on of about 300,000, that was likely maybe closer to 500,000 in tax revenue for the city.
So if I'm understanding correctly, it would expand that tax capacity, and more funds or more properties coming onto the rolls. And we just have to plan ahead for some of the things that might happen with the Housing Redevelopment Fund of that, because that's a smaller amount. So bigger amount is going to be the income. Is that accurate?
Yes, yep. It's going to increase the tax base for the city, or the tax base that is available for the city. And, you know, if you have one smaller TIF district coming, being decertified, you may not see a huge impact, or it may not make a huge impact to that. But with some of the larger districts, especially the Lindale, Interchange West Lindale Gateway District, that will have a huge impact when that is decertified on the tax revenue for the city.
All right, thank you. That helps. I need to hear some of this stuff 2 or 3 times to fully understand it. So are there any other questions? All right, then at this point, the motion before, or the item before us is consideration of the existence of the report. So is there a motion to accept the HRA annual tax increment financing district status update?
So moved.
Second, Commissioner Reese Daniels.
So it's been moved by Commissioner Sandal and seconded by Commissioner Reese Daniels to accept the Richfield HRA tax increment financing district status update. Are there any further questions or discussion? All right, thank you. Administrative Assistant Dubois, would you please take the roll?
Yes, thank you. Chair Supple,
Aye.
Commissioner Vries Daniels,
Aye.
Commissioner Reagan Gonzalez,
Aye.
Commissioner Sandal.
Aye.
We have 4 ayes. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item is to consider a resolution approving an amendment to the contract for private development with CP2 Development LLC for the Cedar Point 2 apartment development project. Executive Director Stark.
Thank you, Chair Supple. I'm going to ask Housing and Redevelopment Manager Julie Urban to present the staff report.
Thank you, Executive Director Stark. Sorry. Thank you, Executive Director Stark, Chair Supple, members of the Commission, the HRA. Back in September 17th, 2018, you approved a contract for private development with NHH companies, now doing business as CP2 Development. The contract calls for the construction of 218 market rate apartments on HRA-owned property located on Richfield Parkway between 63rd and 65th Streets. The overall project consists of 2 components, the second of which is construction of 64 townhomes on property located to the west of the apartments. So back on September 29th, the HRA approved a memorandum of understanding with the developer that laid out several proposed changes to the contract. As agreed to in the MOU, the proposed amendment to the contract makes the following changes. Excuse me. The number of apartment units is increasing from 218 to 237. The minimum market value will increase from approximately $32 million to $42 million. The developer will provide the HRA, excuse me. Sorry about that. The developer will provide the HRA with $780,000 at the closing of the construction loan to be used to pay for the assessment against the property. The pay-as-you-go note to the developer is increasing from $3,960,000 to $4,305,000. A second note in the amount of $590,800 is being provided. Construction will begin no later than June 1st, 2021 and be completed by December 31st of 2022. The closing date on the apartment property is extended to October 31st, 2020. And also we ask that the executive director be authorized to extend that an additional 30 days if needed. The tax increment financing schedule will provide a 10% contribution to the Housing and Redevelopment Fund throughout the life of the TIF district. Under the current contract, the contribution is delayed until year 9. So in this instance, we won't have that delay. An estimated $651,000 would be generated for the Housing and Redevelopment Fund, which is a just under $200,000 increase from the original contract. And then finally, the contract and its terms will be assigned to equity partner Schaefer Richardson or an affiliate entity once they have the legal documents ready to go. The other terms of the contract remain the same. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them, but this is the same stuff that we went over a couple of weeks ago on the 29th in the MOU, just sort of formalized in the contract this time.
Are there any questions for staff? All right. Would someone like to move the item?
I'll make the motion. Commissioner Reagan Gonzalez.
I'll second. Commissioner Vries Daniels.
Thank you. It's been moved by Commissioner Reagan Gonzalez and seconded by Commissioner Vries Daniels to adopt a resolution approving an amendment to the contract for private development with CP2 Development LLC for the Cedar Point 2 apartment development project. Are there any discussion questions? All right, it does not look like any discussion questions, and as you mentioned, it's very similar to what we discussed 2 weeks ago. So at this point, I'm going to call the question. So Administrative Assistant Dubois, could you please take the roll?
Yes, thank you. Chair Supple,
Aye.
Commissioner Vries Daniels,
Aye.
Commissioner Reagan Gonzalez,
Aye.
Commissioner Sandal.
Aye.
We have 4 ayes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have HRA discussion items. Are there any items that any commissioners would like to bring up? All right, then we'll move on to the executive director's report. Executive Director Stark.
I do not have an HRA report for you tonight.
Okay, thank you. Next, we would then move on to claims.
I move approval.
Second, Commissioner Bruce Daniels.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Sandal and seconded by Commissioner Breeze Daniels to approve the claims. Are there any questions or discussions? All right, in that case, Administrative Assistant Dubois, would you please take the roll? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Chair Supple,
Aye.
Commissioner Breeze Daniels,
Aye.
Commissioner Reagan Gonzalez,
Aye.
Commissioner Sandal.
Aye.
We have 4 ayes. Thank you.
You're muted, Chair Supple.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So seeing that we have finished our business, we stand adjourned. I do have a question for staff member Scove. Do we need to wait a minute to flip over for the EDA, or do we just continue on with this same broadcast?
You just continue on.
All right, so if we are ready to go, since we have adjourned the HRA meeting, I'm going to call to order the October 19th, 2020 meeting of the Richfield Economic Development Authority, and it's a virtual meeting held via WebEx. Administrative Assistant Dubois, would you please take the attendance?
Yes, thank you. President Supple,
Aye.
Commissioner Breeze Daniels,
Here.
Commissioner Reagan Gonzalez,
Here.
Commissioner Elliott, not present. Commissioner Sandal.
Sure.
Thank you. We have 4 members present.
Thank you. Next, you said that in the last meeting that we are being broadcast on 2 mediums, so I believe we can indeed ask for open forum. So open forum is an opportunity for citizens to address the EDA on items not on the current agenda. And you would dial the phone number 612-861-0651. And as you call in, a moderator will assist you. So is there anyone on the line?
President Supple, there are no callers on the line at this time.
Okay, we'll just pause for a bit because I do believe, like, if it's on YouTube and some of those, it takes a little while for the message to get across. So we'll pause and see if any residents would like to call in. So are there any other callers on the line?
No callers, President Supple.
Okay, then we'll continue. And if someone calls in the next few minutes as we're going through the housekeeping business, we'll pause and let them speak to the EDA. So our next item would be approval of the minutes of the regular EDA meeting of September 21st, 2020.
I'll move approval, Commissioner Bruce Daniels.
Second, Commissioner Reagan Gonzalez.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Breeze Daniels and seconded by Commissioner Reagan Gonzalez to approve the minutes from September 21st. Are there any additions or corrections? Hearing none, we will call the roll. Thank you.
Thank you. President Supple,
Aye.
Commissioner Bruce Daniels,
Aye.
Commissioner Reagan Gonzalez,
Aye.
Commissioner Sandal.
Aye.
We have 4 ayes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we're moving on to the approval of the agenda.
I will move the agenda, Commissioner Reese Daniels.
Second, Suzanne Sandal.
All right, it's been moved by Commissioner Reese Daniels and seconded by Commissioner Sandal to approve the agenda. Are there any discussion items or questions? All right, then we will call the roll. Thank you, Administrative Assistant.
Thank you. President Supple,
Aye.
Commissioner Bruce Daniels,
Aye.
Commissioner Reagan Gonzalez,
Aye.
Commissioner Sandal.
Aye.
We have 4 ayes. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item is an amendment to the guidelines for the Kids at Home program to expand participation in cases of unforeseen events causing financial hardship. So I'll turn it over to Executive Director Stark for the report.
And thank you. And I will pass that along to Housing and Redevelopment Manager Julie Urban for the report.
Thank you. Chair Supple, President Supple, members of the EDA. As you know, the Kids at Home program is a shallow rent subsidy program designed to help families with children in Richfield schools attain a stable housing situation. As studies show, this is a key factor in success. The program is now celebrating its 15th year of serving the community. To date, over 150 families have benefited from the program. Under the current guidelines, the program provides 4 years of rental assistance and requires a member of the household to be working a minimum of 30 hours per week. The proposed revisions would offer some flexibility to these requirements in the case of an unforeseen event that imposes a severe financial hardship to the family. Some unforeseen events could include, but would not necessarily be limited to, unexpected job loss by an adult family member, housing loss due to fire or natural disaster, death of an immediate family member, pandemic, and/or a major illness. Under the revised guidelines, participation in the program could be extended up to 1 year in length. The family would need to continue to meet other criteria of the program guidelines. Work hour reduction amounts would be determined on a case-by-case basis. As you may have guessed, there is some real examples that are happening because of the pandemic. And we have a couple of families who are near the end of the program, but have faced severe hardship this year. And we just don't feel like it's meeting the program goals to not let them stay on the program for an additional amount of time. So we are just asking for some flexibility. One of the beauties of this local program is that we are able to look at the guidelines and review them regularly and adapt and make changes so that the program continues to meet our goals and to serve our families well. And so we ask that you consider those changes so that we can have that flexibility. I would like to point out, if anybody is listening, that on October 27th, we will make applications available. We do have some openings and we are hoping to get those all filled because we know that there's great need out there. And you'll be able to get that application through November 13th. So you go on our website to do that. Organizations like VEEP typically go on and get that application. So if you do miss that deadline, you can contact them to get a copy of it. And then the paperwork and the application is all due November 23rd. And then the hope is to get folks on the program and ready to go in either January or February of next year. So with that, I'll take any questions or that you may have.
Do we have any questions? Commissioner Bruce Daniels?
One, I'm really happy that you proposed that we change this, so thank you. I thought we moved Kids at Home back to HRA. No, am I just confused?
Well, it's still your money.
Okay.
It's just going into the Housing Trust Fund, which is then administered by the HRA. So there was a question that our accountant brought up. It's like, who should be? To me, it's still your program, since it is
Okay.
your money. So yeah,
Gotcha.
it seemed like it's confusing. Yes.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Any comments?
I will go ahead and move the motion that we amend the guidelines of the Kids at Home program to expand participation and allow flexibility in the work requirement due to unforeseen events that cause financial hardship. I think it's a good plan.
Second, Commissioner Regan Gonzalez.
So it's been moved by Commissioner Sandal and seconded by Commissioner Regan Gonzalez. Are there any comments or discussion? Go ahead, Commissioner Sandal. Would you like to speak to your motion?
I just want to say, give kudos to Susan Rosenberg, who was very instrumental in this program being started 15 plus years ago. And obviously it's a good program because it's still here and doing good work. So thanks to her and thanks to all of the other commissioners and EDA members who've supported it.
Other comments or questions? I would also like to say thank you to staff for being flexible and figuring out ways to help people during the pandemic, because there are all these unforeseen things happening and it's really important to be there for the residents of our communities. So thank you for figuring out how to do that. Are there any other questions or comments? All right, then Administrative Assistant Dubois, would you please take the roll?
Yes, thank you. President Supple?
Aye.
Commissioner Vries Daniels?
Aye.
Commissioner Regan Gonzalez?
Aye.
Commissioner Sandal? We have 4 ayes. Thank you.
All right, moving on to EDA discussion items. Are there any items that anyone would like to bring up? Commissioner
I just had a question. Maybe Mr. Stark will be addressing this, but has the second round of business loans applications, have you gotten lots of those?
Yes. So the second round, the deadline for application is tonight at midnight. Based on the funding we have, we think that there's enough funding for anywhere between 25 and 35 loans, depending on, each loan is of a differing amount depending on the size of the business. As of this afternoon, I believe we had 21 already received. I anticipate we'd get a couple more yet toward the closing of the day. When you approved the second round last month, it was with the caveat that I would have some leeway in making programmatic changes, and I want to keep you informed of those changes. So I'm going to share my screen with you for a moment. And just, so the changes that I've made, or I am making, are highlighted in yellow. So the application due date is tonight, and I'm saying that's the priority. With any remaining funds, we would keep it open the remainder of the week, for now at least. We are under a time crunch because we need to have these funds expended by November 15th in order to get reimbursement from the Federal CARES Act. So we're hoping that if not tonight, yet this week, we would be able to get enough applications to close this out. We also are specifying that the businesses must be registered with the Secretary of State as a Richfield-based business. There have been questions in the first round. For example, if you're a salesperson, and you office in Bloomington, but you do sales from your house, that the location of the business must be in Richfield. If there were some kind of gray area one, I think that we would err on the side of providing the loan or bringing it to you for like an appeal kind of a deal. The other changes we've made are for the forgiveness. The expenses we're allowing to be forgiven for would be rent paid for a commercial space in Richfield. property taxes paid for commercial space in Richfield, or if someone's officing out of their single family home, that they could claim 25% of the property taxes from their home. So those are the changes that I'm making to the program. We continue to be excited about this. We have gotten a lot of interest and a lot of questions, and report.
All right, are there other comments or questions? I was happy to see that you were emphasizing the things that the loan could be forgiven for, because as we've talked to people, a lot of people are hesitant to take on more debt because they don't want to bog down their business with that. So the fact that this could be forgivable is a good thing, because that's the kind of help that the businesses are looking for. And I appreciate the flexibility that if there are some more people, if there are funds that people could, for another week or so, be able to apply again. So the fact that I think we should emphasize that it is going to be forgivable if you meet those criteria.
Yeah, we're doing everything we can. We, quite frankly, we don't want the money back. We'd rather have it get out in the community. So we're doing everything we can to have the funds forgiven.
All right, thank you. Are there other questions on that matter? All right, we're still in the EDA discussion items. Are there other items that anyone would like to bring up? All right, and then we'll move on to the executive director's report, and perhaps he's just given it, but
that was it.
That was it? Okay, thank you. And so then we'll move on to claims.
I'll move claims, Commissioner Reese Daniels.
Second, Commissioner Regan Gonzalez.
All right, we've had claims moved by Commissioner Reese Daniels and seconded by Commissioner Regan Gonzalez. Are there any questions? All right, then we'll go ahead and take the roll. Thank you, Administrative Assistant Dubois.
Thank you. President Semple.
Aye.
Commissioner Reese Daniels.
Aye.
Commissioner Regan Gonzalez.
Aye.
Commissioner Sandal.
Aye.
We have 4 ayes. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you all for your time. We have finished all of the business on our agenda, and we stand adjourned. Have a lovely evening.